Hello everybody and welcome to episode number 6 of the Let's Learn a Change of Seasons guitar series. Today we will be covering every single note, every single time change, every single chord progression, and a full detailed musical analysis of The Inevitable Summer by Dream Theater. So let's relinquish the dark winter from part 4 and the fake news from part 5 as we embrace the warmth of the crimson sun once again. The Inevitable Summer is the third and final instrumental section during the A Change of Seasons suite. It is mainly comprised of a guitar solo and a keyboard solo in two very distinct and, shall I say, disparate styles. One being in a smooth B minor groove in 7/4 timing, the other being a big badass motorcycle blowing gas right out of its ass. In the key of C sharp, of course. And a little interesting tidbit, this guitar solo comes only 1 minute after the previous one in part 5. I guess JP just couldn't control himself, now could he? The two solos are connected by very complex and involved bits used to pivot in and out of the different key centers. And of course we can't forget that The Inevitable Summer serves to ease us into the final part of the song by bringing back familiar themes from earlier, starting with this bass line under the first section of the guitar solo. Let's check it out. The first guitar part is a big beefy B power chord way down below, a lot of gain, just like that. Now, that's very simple. What follows that is the bass line from A Crimson Sunrise, or one of the bass lines I should say, and that goes like this. Sound familiar? Right, that's exactly what sets up this whole section. Now we're in 7/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, boom. And we let it hold out. Now this is a bass call, which is then supported by a response from Mike Portnoy's Glockenspiel. The bass then comes back with the riff, leaving that nice B on the bottom to give us some space for the percussion fills. There's no melody on this one, so it gives our ears a break from that idea. So this portion can be seen as such. The bass plays the call, the Glockenspiel plays the response, the bass plays the call once again, and then with no response. This then repeats one more time. Now let's get into the guitar lead. Before even playing a single note, you're going to need a delay pedal set to approximately 642 beats per minute. Now that's an incredibly long delay trail. Typically you're around like 300, 400 for even on the long side, but here 642. So when you play that lick, it's going to repeat very, very far after, and so don't let that freak you out when you're doing this. It's supposed to give it that kind of effect. It actually sounds pretty good with the fast notes as well. We also need a volume pedal, preferably a volume pedal. You don't need one. You can use your volume knob to set it kind of low at the beginning so that the notes fade out, right? But having a volume pedal makes it far easier to control than needing to go to the knob the whole time, because you're going to need to get that whammy bar action going as well. So if you're adjusting your volume knob and the whammy bar, you're going to run into some trouble. So just like I said before, this first lick is outlining a B minor 11th in the pentatonic scale. So that first hammer-on actually holds out in E, which is the 11th that I was talking about just before. We're also going to call this section A. Let me play the entire lick. Ready? E is the 11th. Slide out. So we're starting off in the 9th fret of the D string with a little nice muted note, just like that. Or not really muted, but softly played. You want to use your fingers for this as well. You're going to go 7-9 hammer into the 11th, a hammer-on pull-off, and then into a slide, which is the 6th fret. That's a C sharp. That is the 9th of the B minor chord. Then we slide out of that Alright, but you don't want to hit it again. You want to slide out of it the first time you hit it. And then we're going to go like this. 4th fret of the D. You're going to do a little hammer on from the 4th to the 6th fret, a bend, and then come back. Listen again, 4th fret here, hammer, bend, release, and then pull off. So that's not too crazy, just some tasty little licks to get us into the solo. Now the next part is a little more interesting, alright? So we wait for the chokes on the crash cymbal to happen, and we do this next. Now with the delay, that's far more effective. Now, for the sake of this explanation, I'm not going to have the delay on so you can see and hear all the notes I'm playing. So I'm starting with an octave from the 9th fret of the D to the 12th fret of the B. That's the root note. Okay, so an octave. The next two notes are a perfect fifth on the 10th fret of the B and the 12th fret of the E string. So that's an A to an E. That's the flat 7th and the 11th. Alright, continuing with the theme. We then slide out of that 12th fret to the 10th fret. That's the minor 3rd. Okay? And then we do this right there. 7th fret of the B to the 10th fret of the E. That's a minor 6th interval. Okay, but part of the B minor chord. F sharp and D. And then we do this. Another perfect fifth from the 7th fret of the G to the 10th of the B. That's a D, which is the flatted 3rd, to an A, the flatted 7th. So you can call this a B minor 7 with an 11th, or whatever you want to call it, B minor 9. It's basically jazz at this point. And then a nice whole step bend on the 9th fret going up to the note F sharp, which is the perfect fifth. The next lick is basically a Dorian blues, followed by what's almost a secret pentatonic lick. You have to really listen closely. You can barely hear it in the recording, but I'll show you what I mean. Let me play you the first part. Here I got nice and quiet and secretive toward the end. Let's check that out in detail. Starting off on the 7th of the B and the E like this. Alright, so that's just a standard, as if we're playing some kind of Chuck Berry riff. And then we're going like this. We're going to be on a double stop, 9th fret of the G and the B, so that's a major 3rd. Doing a little half step bend, very bluesy, into the 7th fret of the same two strings, and then pull off 7 and 9 of the D. Okay, and then we end on that F sharp 9th fret of the A string, but then very secretively, like Secret Squirrel, Moose and Squirrel. You remember Rocky and Bullwinkle? This has nothing to do with that. We're going to come down like this. Very tasty, and also incorporates the 7th string on our 7-string guitar, which is nice. I don't like it when John Petrucci doesn't use the 7th string in a 7-string song, but check it out. We're going to actually slide from the 9th fret to the 7th like this on the A string, and then pull to the 5th fret. Alright, so this is all just B minor pentatonic, and then pull off 7-5, and then slide from the 7th to the 5th of the B string, off to the open B, and then with a nice little flat 3rd to open B resolution. So very cool. One more time. And use legato where applicable. So that's section A. Let's get all of that in one go very slowly. Here we go. Octaves, fifths, almost like triplets there, and then here, use your pick there. Very nice, and you want to make it real quiet on that last one. Don't tell anybody about that. The next part of the solo establishes a nice tight groove in that 7/4 timing. It also establishes a brand new chord progression that's going to loop around 3 times. So this also sets up a dynamic shift, and it sets the tone for the rest of the solo. This first part was very, very quiet. The next part is going to increase in volume and dynamic and intensity. And the last part is going to go even further. Okay, so we're going to be building up this solo. Each section is going to have its own unique feel to it. Okay, so this is section B. We're going to listen to it right now with those chords playing as well. rhythm section here is very important to grasp, so I'm really going to take the time to explain it and break it down right here. First is within the drums. Right off the bat, we have a snare fill that comes in just prior to beat 7 during that spacey part that we just went over before. This sets up the entire section. The groove that comes in accents beats 3 and 7 and utilizes the closed hi-hat to remind us that this is the smoothest summertime groove that we're ever going to hear. On top of that, we get this really awesome bass groove. Check this out. Very cool and very simple too, right in the pocket. The bass riff becomes a little bit busy at the tail end of that phrase with some added 16th notes. Pretty cool. And Mike Portnoy also joins in the very first time with a drum fill that goes exactly with that rhythm. So perfectly placed interplay between John Myung and Michael Portnoy at that point in time. Now this variation only goes 2 times before we have to shift the progression and the feel entirely. And this is still within section B, mind you. This solidifies the 2 different grooves that are going to be alternating between the course of the solo. It also is the first inclination that we are reinforcing the Crimson Sunrise idea, which is this. Remember that? Except this time we are completely shifting the harmonic context. We're not just playing a B minor this time, we're playing a whole bunch of different chords on top that weren't seen before. And here's that chord progression in its entirety. We start on a B minor on the 1 chord, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A over B, pedal tone B, E minor over B, still that pedal tone, G over B, back to B minor, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A over B, and then we have this, here's the shift. Whoa! E flat to C. Now what's going on there? The final shift at the end of the progression with the E flat over G to a C is shifting us into the key of G minor. But not only that, we're also mode mixing in the process. So John Myung is actually making us feel like we're still in the key of B minor by playing a G pedal on top of both of those. Remember, we're not playing a G minor at all, even though we're in the key of G minor. That's also allowed. We're playing an E flat over G, and then a C over G. But the bass line is on top of a G, right? Or the bass line is a G, I should say. And within the key of B minor, that's the flat 6 chord, which is a very, very common move. But I will reiterate, just because we have a G does not mean we need a G chord. We actually have an E flat over a G, which creates an inverted flat 6 chord in the key of G minor, but it's also a tritone away from the A chord that we just experienced prior. So a lot of movement going on here. Pretty intense stuff. So let's hear an A going to an E flat first. That's pretty jarring because it's moving a full tritone away using major chords. But because of the placement of the bass line, because the bass is playing a B to a G, it makes those 2 chords feel much more welcoming and not as jarring when they move between them. Here's the A over the B and the E flat. Because of that motion, it makes it feel much more natural, and we don't feel like we're getting our heads ripped off by a wolf. Now let's actually look at the function of these chords. The E flat chord is the flat 6 of the G minor scale, and the G is a flat 6 of the B minor scale. So technically it's the flat 6 of the flat 6 of B minor. So that's a lot of flat 6. Now if that weren't confusing enough, we have a C chord being thrown into the mix on top of a G. When we have a G on the bottom, it's a second inversion because the G is the 5th of the C chord, okay? So it makes it sound kind of rocky when you hit it. Not totally resolved, if you know what I'm saying, but that C chord is not part of the G minor scale proper. It's actually a part of the G Dorian scale. The G Dorian scale is the second mode of the F major scale, which now brings us technically a tritone away from B minor, our original key. Listen to that. We're taking a function from that key and putting it into this original progression. Let's put the G minor scale and G Dorian scale next to each other. The G minor scale looks like this. G1, A2, B flat, flat third, C4, D5, E flat, flat 6, F flat 7, and the G is the 1. Okay, the G Dorian scale looks like this. G, which is the 1, A, 2, B flat, flat 3, C, 4, D, 5, E natural, which is a natural 6 or just a regular 6, F flat 7, and G, which is 1. The only difference between the G Dorian and Aeolian modes is the 6th. In the Aeolian we have a flat 6, and in the Dorian mode we have a natural 6. Those are the sounds. E flat major is the flat 6 chord of the G minor scale. It contains the notes E flat, G, and B flat, or 1, 3, and 5. Now let's take this a step further. Since we're going to a C chord, we know that now, let's put a C on the bottom of that chord. We now have C, E flat, G, and B flat, or 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. That's a C minor 7th chord, which would create a minor 4 chord in the key of G minor. Now, as we know, we have a C major, so let's make this a major chord. C, E, G, B flat. We create a dominant 7th chord by doing that. The only note we have to change is the E flat to an E, alright? Using the flat 6 and the natural 6th, just to make that work, so it fits nice and snug into our chord progression. Now bear with me for one more point. That C chord is actually a flat 2 going back to the original key of B minor. Now for anybody who's been paying attention since the beginning, we go to a C chord at the intro of a change of seasons, right? Remember that whole thing? Pretty genius stuff. We're coming full circle and we're not even done with the song yet. Here's the first section of solo B. Let's take a look at that first lick. We're sliding into the 11th fret of the G string like this, going into the 12th of the B, and then picking into the 14th fret of the B, just like that, and then coming back down. That creates a B minor 9 sound. We have the F sharp on the bottom, which is the 5th, the B, which is the root, and the C sharp, which is the 9th. Very jazzy. The second one goes like this. So we're sliding from the 9th to the 11th on the G, and then hammering from the 10th to the 12th on the B, and then pulling off onto that 10th fret once again. This is creating a B minor 7 instead of the 9th, but this could also be included in B minor 9th as well, and B minor 11. In jazz, we have a lot of extensions that can be made with one chord. The third bit outlines an E minor 7 like this. It's almost as if we're playing in the key of E minor, right? We're starting on the 9th fret of the D string, hammering from 7 to 9 on the G, doing a double 9, and then like this, 7, 8 on the B, with a little hammer-on pull-off back to the 9th on the G. Now we're outlining an E minor 7th chord. We have the 5th on the bottom, the flat 7 here, going to the root. Very cool. And we're still kind of keeping in line with that B minor 11 feel. Remember, the E is the 11th of B minor, but it's also the root of the E minor chord that's being played in the background. So a lot of double entendres going on. The next two notes go like this. That's the F sharp and G. That's 1, 2, and flat 3. So that's Mary Had a Little Lamb in a minor key. The fourth bit highlights a G major 7 arpeggio and some G major chord notes in 6. So that's all G major 7 proper. The 7th and 8th fret from the previous chord now become the major 7th and the root of this chord. And that's the 5th, coming down to a minor 6 interval, which is B and G, the 3rd and the root, sliding up to the 5th and the 3rd. Alright, so it's all just G major arpeggio ideas. The next section keeps with a similar theme, but then gets a little bit busier toward the end with some legato runs, bringing us into the modulation. It sounds like this. fancy stuff. The first part gives us the same idea that we had in the first measure of this section, but with a pinch harmonic added. So we're sliding into the 11th like this, and getting a nice pinch harmonic to ring out on that 9th. So that's a C sharp of the B minor chord. Sounds pretty awesome, especially with the delay trail taking care of the repeats. The next bit requires us to use a little bit of the whammy bar, and it's a little more legato as well, with some big leaps. So check this out. We go from the 11th to the 12th. You see that nice dip I had on the 12th fret of the E string? Got to make sure you hit that. Now, the best way to do this is to keep your palm on the lower strings of the guitar, because you have so many strings, they can easily ring out if you let them just go. Look, see how easy it is to make noise with them? Right, that can happen very easily. So you want to keep your palm on those strings, and you want to have your bar easily accessible to this hand, and you want to dip down like that. So basically what's going on here is we have, let me do that again. We slide from the 11th to the 12th, hit the 14th of the E string, and then legato, you got to slide down without picking, and then dip on a hammer, pull off, pick, and then pull off again. So all legato stuff there. The third part of this starts on the 7th beat with 2 8th notes, starting on the 8th fret of the B string. So we're going to cover all that with this little section. So we're starting 8th fret on the B and going like this. 7 ands, boom. Onto this note right here, which is a B flat. That's the 5th of the E flat chord. So that's right on the modulation, right on the money where we should be. And we're basically outlining an E flat Lydian mode, which makes sense because it's the flat 6 of the G minor scale. So then we're doing some more legato coming down from the 10th, 12th, and 10th fret. Alright, so we're obviously in G minor here. Look. Pretty cool. And then we do a legato run up this, what looks like a D minor pentatonic scale, but it's actually still within the key of the G minor. And then we dip to the 12th fret, which is E natural, right? Remember, that's the G Dorian mode, which helps us ease into the C chord, okay? So the first run is on the E flat. And then it anticipates the C that we're going to be hitting next, the E being the major third of the C chord. We then run down, just another little pentatonic looking thing, and then we do these last 3 notes. Wow, okay, so that's a little interesting. We're actually outlining the flat 7, the root, and the 9th of the C chord, alright? Which is also another Mary Had a Little Lamb, but a far more advanced Mary Had a Little Lamb. This is a hyperspace Mary Had a Little Lamb on top of the C. That's what it sounds like melodically. Pretty damn cool. And then we're immediately anticipating the 9th of the B minor chord, a C sharp. Alright, now C sharp would sound awful on top of a C otherwise if you weren't anticipating the B minor. Alright, so that sounds kind of like this melodically. So it doesn't sound too bad in context when you really put it all together. All the half-step bends and legato runs make this solo feel incredibly liquid and loose, which is not characteristic of John Petrucci. Usually when I think of JP, I think of tight, like a toiga. But in this case, he's acting more like Jeff Beck rather than Al Di Meola. Loose rather than tight. The third section of the solo, section C, will bring more variation and more dynamic shift. So we're going to be increasing volume and intensity a little bit. We're going to be more and more busy. And we also have a different bass riff that we have to contend with. Let's check that out. drum groove is still accenting beats 3 and 7, so there's not too much to say there. The bass groove, although sounding very similar, does something very intriguing. There's two variations to this bass line, which I'm going to call variation A and variation B. Here it is from the whole form. Ready? Variation A. 2 times. Variation B. 2 times as well. Variation A. Variation B. So did you see what happened there? We played variation A twice, followed by B 2 times, and then we cut it in half. Variation A once, and variation B once. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing to point out. Good job, John Myung. This section also reintroduces the melodic theme from the Crimson Sunrise back in the beginning in the keyboard part. Check this out. You are once again surrounded by a Final Fantasy IX. Let's get into the guitar part for real. The first part, like I said before, outlines a B minor 9 with a half-step bend from C to C sharp. And then we go up to here, 10th fret on the E string, then a hammer from 10 to 12 on the B, and then pulling off at the very last section for a nice little tasty thing there. That's basically over a B minor 7 or B minor 9. The next part sounds as if Lynyrd Skynyrd went to college. Let's check this out. It's like a super advanced version of that southern rock bend that we love. We've all heard Freebird before, but here we're changing the notes on the top each time. And then waiting to release it at the very end. We're at the 17th fret of the B string, full step bend, use your middle finger. With your pinky, you want to grab the 19th fret of the E string, keep that bent, and then, look at that. So you're going like this, 19, 17, 15. That's actually a minor second interval when you include those bends. Look. Sounds pretty terrible when you play it by itself, right? But we're not playing it by itself, we're playing it in context, silly. And then we do the release after that. And then a beautiful little bend, not a little bend, it's a whole step bend like this. The next lick takes on a very wild turn of events with a pentatonic fury. So that's a lot of stuff to go through, so let's break that down individually. So we have the first part that goes like this. We actually have a pre-bend on the 15th fret of the B string, alright? So that's coming in like this. That's resolving from the E to the D. That's the 4th to the flat 3rd, or the 11th to the 4th to the 3rd, the flat 3rd. I'm sorry, I messed that up. But we're doing that. And then we're coming down the arpeggio like this. 16, 16 on G and D. And then a nice little tasty quarter step bend on that last part with a nice stop. So, outlining a B minor 7th chord, okay? So, pretty basic there. The next part goes like this. Alright, so that sounds like a stereotypical line, but we're using some patterns that aren't often played by blues players. So we're going like this, bending at the 14th fret of the G, which would be the flatted 7th, going up to the root like this. And then pulling off from that 14th fret to the 11th fret, alright? So this is all just a B minor 7 type of idea, or pentatonic. And then we're going to hit the 14th fret on the D string, coming back up to the 11th, and then 12th to 14th down on the A string. Now that is a B minor arpeggio. Doesn't get any more basic like that. So really we're playing B minor 11th once again. It doesn't go away now, does it? Look. Very nice and very quick as well. You got to be very quick with these 16th notes. The next part climbs up even more 16th notes like this. That's just going straight up the B minor pentatonic scale, starting on an upbeat. Then we got to go into this really long string of notes that don't stop until we hit the 11th fret of the G. And we don't really get a break until that point, so bear with me as we go through this whole thing. Ready? Real slow. Now that's a lot of notes that we got to play, and we got to fit it in a very small period of time. So we're going to start like this. We're going from the 16th fret of the G like this, 14th on the B, 15th, double pick, and then back and then come up here. Just in that order. Okay, so we're going to wind up at the 16th fret of the D, sliding down the pentatonic scale on the previous pattern that we have. But then we're going to change it up a little bit. Here we have a hammer on like this, 11th to 12th on the D string. That's the second and the flatted third, so C sharp and D. That's the 9th. So we're always going back to this B minor 7, B minor 9, B minor 11. But that's what this is, 9th. And then we have this little fancy bit that actually outlines the flat 6 chord. It's almost as if we're dipping into E minor temporarily. And then resolving right back into the B minor chord. So we have some different parts here. We have this. Okay, so you got to get that down first. And then, so if you split it up in 2 like that, or even in sections of 3, and then down, and then this, then it'll be a lot easier for you to get through this whole thing. I always suggest doing that. Split up larger sections into smaller bits so it makes it easier for you to practice, and you don't want to rip your hair out at the end of the day. A lot of these licks go over the bar and appear on very strange beats within the measure, a measure of 7/4 nonetheless. So this is an indicator that this was heavily improvised, alright? And a lot of Petrucci solos are usually composed very thoroughly, but this one I feel like is far more improvised than a lot of the other ones. Not a big deal. It's excellent. I love it. And it's manageable. We're going to be able to get through this. But the best way to get through would be to understand where those little breaks are within the solo. When you can take a break. Like this whole part, you can't. But there, you can. You have a little bit of solace, a little bit of time to breathe before hitting the next section, which, by the way, is going to be this. So another leapy legato run. We're starting at the 11th fret of the G string, and we're going to slide from 11 to 12 like this. And then going to the 14th fret, which is C sharp. So a lot of dissonant notes there. We're going to the flat 6 and the 9th at the same time within this B minor context. And then back to the pentatonic. 10-12 on the B. Alright, and then 10th on the E string, just pentatonic, just like I said. And then we're going like this. A little dip on that 12th fret once again. Petrucci really likes dipping on the 12th fret. I don't know what it is about that. But right after that dip, you got to slide up. So you got to make that one motion like this. And then pull off again. So it's almost like a trill. And then, so that looks almost like an E minor arpeggio, okay? But that makes a little bit of sense. I mean, we did hit a G and an E minor at one point in this progression, so it's not that far-fetched that we'd hit it here. So one more time. And just be very careful about the phrasing and keep it legato, for cripe's sake. That lick must also be done before beat 6, and that then gives way to the key change once again, where we play this. Just a basic pentatonic idea in a G minor position. Alright, so we're actually doing something normal for once. Thank you, John Petrucci. I appreciate you as a friend and a confidant. So here we go. We're basically just doing a couple little, a pull-off right on the 15th to the 18th. And then 15th, 18th on the E string as well. But you're going to pick those two. And then we got to go like this. 15, 18, half step bend, release, back down, 15, 18 on the B, 15 on the B. So, and then we scale back up. But skip that 17th fret and then slide and come back down. Well, not like that. You're going to do it like this. Alright, so you got to make sure you have enough volume there. It's very hard to play these parts slow because you run out of sustain, god damn it. That first lick here is actually an E flat major 7th chord, watch, or a major 9. Sounds pretty awesome when you play it with the chord. Well, that's what's happening in the song. And then finally, when it goes to the C, it's a straight up C7 chord. So everything checks out in that department. Great use of theoretical knowledge. And here's the entirety of section C, slow. one more bit to go, and this is where the dynamic becomes its most intense. Let's listen to section D, big old D. Finally done lollygagging and bring ourselves full force into the Crimson Sunrise bass riff idea, the funk riff like this. That's going to be the rhythm for the entirety of this part of the solo, but the same chord progression remains on the very top. The first bit of section D sounds like this. This bit kind of reminds me of the final lick in Another Day from Images and Words. John Petrucci ripping himself off, but at least we're in B minor this time and not B major. The hallmark of this lick is descending perfect fifths, okay, until we get down to the bottom melodic note. Now, we're starting at the 21st fret of the E string, alright, so way up top here, and going between those three notes, alright, so 21st, 19th on the B, 21st, creating that perfect fifth interval which we're going to use to slide down with. Now, we're starting now on the 9th of the B minor chord, alright, so B minor 9 once again, and we're going to slide down like this. Alright, so we're going to climb down and then we're going to come back up to the original shape. So 21, 19, slide to 17, hit 19 on the E, back up, do the same thing again. And then we got to slide down even further. That's going down to the 15th, and then we do this. So that we resolve on the 9th once again. So this is a C sharp up top, and this is a C sharp down at the bottom. B minor 9 all the way through. Here, try that again. The next part is very long-winded, so once again I'm going to be breaking it into smaller parts as we move along. Here's the full lick. So basically all of that without a single break, so let's get into the very first part. This bit starts over on the 16th fret of the G, and it sort of reminds me of that lick that we saw before, but instead we're stopping right here. So you're going 16, 14, 15 up to the B string, and then we're doing this series of trills and slides, alright? So hammer, pull, slide, hammer, pull, slide, hammer, pull, slide, blah, blah, blah. Watch. So you got to pay attention to where we're landing and where we're winding up. So we're starting on the 15th, 14, down to 12. And then, once again, going down to the 10th fret, scaling down to the 8th, and then pretty much all in one breath. And just picking at the beginning of each trill. After the open B, we continue that lick moving upwards like this with a G major 7 arpeggio. Pretty cool, right? And then immediately we're doing this legato down to the C sharp with another dip, so we're dipping at the 9th fret this time. And then coming down that pentatonic pattern once again. So B minor 9 is just characteristic of this entire thing. We keep going down. That's 9th, 7th, and 6th on the G string, just like that, but you have to pull off and then slide like that. And then we have to do a trill into the open G string with a dive. Then after you dive that, undive and go like this. 2nd fret of the G, dive the 4th fret of that G string, and that's the root note, and then we slide up again. And we do a little bend release, nice action, still on that C sharp by the way. So here's that whole little thing, right? Watch this. Make make sure you get that down perfectly, because if you don't get the phrasing right, it's just going to sound like a big jumbled mess. And then we come up something that almost looks like an A major arpeggio going into a B minor pentatonic. So this is kind of interesting. We're sliding into the 7th fret of the D string, gradually increasing speed up that shape. So 7th fret D, 6th, 9th of the G string. That's a 6-9, but it's not the same type of 6-9. It's an inadvertent 69. So we can give them a pass on that. And then 7-10. 7-10. Okay, so. And then immediately after that, we have to slide into the 12th fret while pulling off to the 10th. So. And then you got to hit that dive, but don't hit a dead note like I just did. Watch that again. Alright? Now this time, we're going to resolve onto the 14th fret, okay? So, and then back down. So, in total, all legato on the way down. If you have to ascend, you're going to have to pick. But if you're descending, try to do as much legato as you possibly can. This very last part gives us a little bit of break from the real crazy stuff. So we're going to be doing some octaves here. So we're starting at the 12th fret, which is G, which checks out. We're in G minor, right? And then that last part is actually outlining the Dorian mode. All right, so we're on the 12th fret for the first one, the 10th and the 13th for the second one, that's an F, the 9th and the 12th, that's an E, the 7th and the 10th, that's a D. Okay, so basically we're going root, flat 7th, natural 6th, 5th, natural 6th, and then ending on the flat 7th of the G. So pretty interesting when all things are considered. Even though they're just octaves, they're playing some pretty cool notes, so I approve. And here's all of section D slow. Are you ready? Here we go. Alrighty, now that was definitely the brunt of part 6, but it's not over yet. The next section that comes in is this quick little complex instrumental bit that connects the guitar solo with the keyboard solo. Let's listen to it. Definitely a tricky bunch of notes, so let's tackle the fret positions first. We're at the 9th and the 7th fret of the D string, B string, and E string like this. That equates to a B add 9 position. Then we go 5th on the E, 6th on the B, and 5th on the G. That's a straight up F major arpeggio. And then we come down here. 5th on the B, 4th of the G, 7th of the D. That's more of like a sus4 or an E sus4 type of thing. And then that's the 4th on the B and the 5th on the D. Okay, so that in total, B add 9, F, E sus4, and then whatever that is. We'll figure that out, don't worry. Second half actually comes up a whole step, but we have to play some different positions to reflect that. We start at the 7th, 8th, and 8th of the G, B, and E respectively, like this. Then we come down to an F sharp major chord progression, or position I should say, at 6, 7, and 6, E, B, G. And then we do the same thing, but down a whole step. We do the sus4, 5, 6, 6, down chromatically, and then into here. All the way down an E major arpeggio at the 4th, 5th, 4th, and 6th, and then ending with this little, it's a little hammer-on or pull-off type of thing, and that's on the C sharp minor pentatonic. So in total, real slow, 9th fret, F, E sus4, whatever, sus4, F sharp, sus4, Now let's check out the time signatures here. We have a measure of 6 at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, into a measure of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have a measure of 6 again, into 2 measures of 4, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a measure of 2, 4, 1, 2, and. So slowly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and boom, into that big old beefy riff, but not yet. We got some more theory to discuss. The function of these chords can't be analyzed very easily through the Western theory lens, so I'm going to take a more intervallic approach to doing this analysis. And let's listen to the isolated keyboards to maybe make it a little easier to hear what's going on. As you can tell, Derek Sherinian is keeping those chords very close to each other and resolving by steps. So there is a B add 9 function going on here, but we're using this sus4 shape to outline that, okay? We have the notes C sharp, F sharp, and B stacked on top of each other. Now that's usually an F sharp sus4, but in this context, because the bass line is playing a B, it's a B add 9. This then goes to F proper. Alright, so if we look at that resolution, right, we have the bottom note, C sharp, moving down a half step to C. Okay, the middle note is moving down a half step as well. The only note that isn't moving a half step is the top note on the E string. That's going down a whole step, almost making it sound like a Lydian progression, but it's not. So, then we take that exact same thing, but we're going to do an E sus4. So that top note stays static. This bottom note goes down a half step, and the middle note goes down a half step. Alright, so everything goes down a half step, except the top note, which stays the same, right? So from here, pretty cool, right? If you keep those common tones together, you can link some very, very unruly chords together with ease. And this does the same exact resolution. Half step on the 2 low and middle notes, and then a full step on the top. Pretty awesome. This entire idea is then taken up a half step. How very creative. In this section, the guitar is a little bit more congruent because it's actually playing that sus4 shape, but over the C, making it a C add 9. But we have the same exact resolutions going like this. Everything's a half step except for that top note. Everything's a half step except for that top note. Everything's a half step except for that top note. And this time, of course, following the time changes as well. After that kerfluffle of a conundrum on a hot, steamy day, we get into some hot, hot heat with this 7-string C sharp minor riff from Derek Sherinian's bunghole. Kind of reminds you of the Caught in a Web riff, right? Petrucci ripping himself off once again. A bit early in your career to be doing that, don't you think? Anyway, here's the idea, and of course it's very, very, very syncopated. We start on beat 1, and then the next one is on the upbeat, the next one is on beat 4. So we have 3 times through the same pattern, like this. See that? So we're playing the exact same thing 3 times. The first one being on beat 1, the next one being on the and the next one being on beat 4, going over the bar line. So this is why this could be really, really, really difficult to get down. The next part starts on the and we go like this. Just like that. And that's the only thing that changes. There's no mutes on that either. Those are all free and open notes. Then we do this one more time. Right into this. And that's just 2 pull-offs right in a row, no mutes. So, very slowly. 1, and 4, and 4. So notice on both measures we're hitting on the downbeat of 4. So beat 4 is a critical crutch in this situation. When it comes to the picking on that first hammer-on, skip the upstroke, so don't go up for that. But then for the rest of it, you want to keep going down, up, down, up, down, up in order to get through that syncopation. So, so every time you hit those last twos, you want to be on an upstroke with your pick. Now that that beefy guitar riff is out of the way, let's take a listen to the most important note in the A Change of Seasons suite. Enjoy. Yes, taking a page right out of Kevin Moore's playbook with the elephant noises. Remember those from Lie? I do. Of course you do. How could you forget being trampled by a herd of 13,000-pound animals in the middle of the harsh African sun? Nobody would forget that. What the hell's wrong with you? Let's get into the keyboard solo with this transition drum fill. And with this keyboard line. Very cool. Now I won't go into painstaking detail with this keyboard solo. I already did that with the guitar solo, right? You can watch a keyboard video for this solo, for the ins and outs, okay? But what I will mention is that most of this solo is in C sharp minor or C sharp minor blues, and C sharp mixolydian, which is a major scale with a flat seventh, and E mixolydian as well, going back and forth between the two. Here's my favorite moment of the keyboard solo. Excellent. Now let's take a look at the rhythm guitar that plays underneath the keyboard solo. It's very similar to the riff that we just heard earlier. That was kind of the setup for this section. We got to add another little bit in the key of E mixolydian, of course. Check this out. The form starts with the same C sharp minor riff as we knew it from before. After you do that, the second half changes quite considerably, like this. So you basically go through the 3 times that you do the bum, 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 and then right after that we go with these power chords, very bluesy, to this. So that's a E, going to an F sharp, and then right up to G, down to D. So we have a Phrygian ending on that bluesy power chord line. The Phrygian mode is, of course, a minor scale with a flatted second. So if you have a C sharp as your root, the Phrygian note would be a D. Okay? It's almost like the Jaws theme song. In fact, it is. So let's get back into the riff now. So we have to do that 2 times all the way through. So let's do the whole thing here. Same thing. And then we repeat one more time through that whole thing. After we hit that D, coming into this next part, we're going into an E mixolydian part. So we're going to head like this. And that's just the same thing 2 times through. Now basically we're going from the flat 7 D, which that flat 2 becomes the pivot flat 7 into the key of E. So that's a pretty cool thing to note. And that goes D to E, flat 7 to 1, with the same rhythm. Now the big difference here is the hammer-ons are no longer bluesy like the C sharp ones, okay? On the C sharp we had the minor third being utilized. On this one we have the major third being utilized. Better yet, a sus4. So this is the A, which is the 4th. That's G sharp. That's the 3rd of the E major chord, alright? And then 1 to flat 7. A perfect mixolydian mode for us, alright? We do that twice through. And then we go right back in to play the C sharp minor riff once again. Here we go, last one. And then right right into a C sharp chord to lead us into the next section. So just one more note about Mike Portnoy's drumming during this section. The first time we heard this riff, we were in a halftime, right? This time we're in a double time. So that's one thing about this. The second thing is the way that he handles the very last power chord section, right? We're playing the syncopated thing, but Mike Portnoy is just playing on every single downbeat, so no syncopation from the drums whatsoever here. Listen to what he does. Immediately following the keyboard solo, we are greeted by a new harmonic section set up by this bass riff. We start off on a C sharp minor riff, but in a higher octave this time, 4th fret of the A string, and we play it like this. 4, 2, 4, hammer, pull, back down to the 4th, and then right into a B power chord. And then we do that again, into this, an A add 9, so stacked fifths. Theoretically, all that's happening is the 1 chord, C sharp minor, to the flat 7th chord, B, back to the 1, to the flat 6 as A. Very nice sound. Now, the timing here is probably the most interesting part. We have a 7/8 time signature going like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like a measure of 4/4, but you're skipping the last 8th note at the very end, so you're skipping a beat. Before this riff even gets to finish one cycle, the guitar and the keyboard come up on top with a more complex progression. Check this out. This is a case where we have a chord progression within another chord progression. So let's play those wah-wah guitar chords and I'll show you what each of them means. This first one is an E major shape, but it's on top of a C sharp, so that makes it a C sharp minor 7, okay? So that makes sense. Then we go right into the A sus2, which is exactly what the bass is playing. A add 9, A sus2, A. It's the same thing, Tony. And then we got to come up to here. That first part is an F sharp 5, an F sharp power chord, but the Judas Priest version with the perfect fourths. And that's basically a sus4, because you're on C sharp, and then we're creating a B add 9 with this perfect 5th up top. Going right to that perfect 4th, that creates a B minor 7. So that's a very cool sound. So check this out. That's with and on top of the C sharp, and then the B add 9. Really cool sound. So it's C sharp minor straight down to a B minor in parallel motion. And then we got to hit this. That's just an extension of C sharp once again, and then we hit back onto this shape. Alright, so real slow, we got C sharp minor 7. Oh, it's an A sus2. C sharp sus4 resolved. B add 9. B minor 7. C sharp extended to the minor 7. Back to the flat 6 chord to end it out. And that goes through 2 times. Right after that, the guitar decides to join the bass riff, leaving the keyboards by their lonesome. Let's check this out. It's a very cool deconstructive approach, right? Start out with both the guitar and the keys playing those chords, then drop the guitar down to the bass riff, leaving Derek playing that by himself, which lends to a very haunting, almost obscured sound with the organ part. The next section brings us way back to the beginning, hearkening to the first heavy riff all the way from part 1. There's a lot of part 1 going on in part 6. The main difference between this part and the one in part 1 is that we are playing it in the key of C sharp, to more fit the context of what we're doing during this section. I'm also very happy that we get to pluck the low B string once again. Now, each time you hit this low C sharp on the 2nd fret like this, you want to palm mute it. The 2 notes in between, don't palm mute, alright? So palm mute this, and then continue on. Don't mute, mute, don't mute, mute, don't mute, don't mute. Alright, those extra 2 notes for the 7/4, you're not going to mute those either, right? And then we are in a timing of 7/4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and boom, right back to the beginning. The second half just gives us some different stuff. We're going like this, same mute structure. Mute, don't mute, do mute. Except we're going to mute the 4th and the 5th leading up to that last G, that tritone away from the root note. So watch this. Mute, don't mute, mute, don't mute, mute, don't mute, mute, bah. So you definitely want to mute those last 2 notes before you hit that tritone. And that's what it sounds like when you play it together. Very diabolical. Beautiful. After that, we get to bring the riff back to the original key of B minor and with power chords this time. So super chunky and super heavy. So now we're back in B, so we have the open B string being palm muted in between each of these. So we're going power chord on 7, 8, 5, 7, 3, 5, 2, 3, 3. Just like that. And that's the entire bit. So it's all the same intervals, just playing power chords throughout that whole thing. Real slow one more time. Nice and tight on everything as well. That continues into a more complex arpeggio section that sounds like this. This is just a series of major arpeggios moving intervallically with different chords. This is very similar to what we saw in part 1, right at the end before it transitioned to part 2. Take a listen. This has some slight differences, however. We are in 3/4 timing, with everything being subdivided with groupings of 3. But those chords are offset by one another, and I'll show you what I mean a little bit later. But here's the actual part. Let's tackle the frets first. We're starting on an open B, going like this. To the 4th fret. That's a major 3rd, okay? So that's almost as if we're going to be playing a B major arpeggio, which is a big change from before. We were in B minor just before. So, 1 major 3rd. Then we go right into the 3rd fret for this. Does that sound familiar or what? That's a D major arpeggio, one of the foundations of Western music. It's beautiful. D, F sharp, A, right? Just 1, 3, 5, and that grouping of 3. So that's what I mean. The grouping of 3s happen offset. We start with a grouping of 2, but then skip the last note. Now we got a grouping of 3, and the rest are going to be groupings of 3. So check that out. We got B major, D major, and then we go right to this, which is G sharp major. Then D major again. Okay, so pretty cool. And then we finally resolve on that final note, which is the 6th fret of the D string. And that's basically, you know, you guessed it, it's a G sharp, the root note of G sharp. The B with that major 3rd allows us to drop down a half step from the D sharp to a D natural for the intended chord progression, which is major chords going through tritones. Much like in part 1. It's actually the exact same chord progression as the end of part 1, except down the octave. Here we have this. On part 1, we had this. Remember that? Before. But this time we don't have that. We end with something a little bit different, actually a lot different. We harken back to the previous chord progression that the bass set up just before in C sharp, but we have some different inversions that we're going to have to talk about. So let's listen to that right now. These chords follow a dotted quarter note rhythm until the bitter end. We have F sharp, which now I'm going to call 1, going to E, which is flat 7, back to F sharp 1, to D, that's flat 6. Okay, so this is starting to make a little more sense now. Remember, we have a chord progression on top of a chord progression. Before, the bass line dictated what was going on harmonically. This time, the bass line still does, but we're much more in line with this F sharp chord progression now. Okay, and then we have this again, which is a C sharp going to an E. That's the minor 5 chord going to the flat 7 once again. And then, of course, this will be the flatted 3rd. But upon further inspection of the bass line, we see that that chord progression is not necessarily what the harmonic value is. Let's take a look at that. The first chord is an F sharp 5 on top of a B. Now that creates a B with an added 9th, or you can call it B sus2. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that shape. Now Dream Theater likes to use stacked fifths quite often if you've been watching these guitar series videos, right? So check this out. We got B add 9, A add 9, then we have F sharp minor in first inversion with an A on top, going to a G add 9. So this is if we play the bass line underneath the guitar part, right? And then here we go down a half step, F sharp add 9, A add 9, 2, A add 9 over B, and then resolving it to the regular A. So to take this idea of having a chord progression within a chord progression even further, we're going to have two separate keys going at the same time. The bass line is dictating something that's more like a B minor progression, while the guitar and the keyboard are playing within an F sharp minor progression, okay? So basically what's happening here is we have B add 9, I'm going to say that's the 1 chord. The A is going to be the flat 7. The F sharp minor, that's going to be the minor 5 chord. It's in first inversion though, so we're using that A to get down to G, which is the flat 6 chord. And then, check this out. The F sharp is the 5 chord, the A is the flat 7th chord, and then that's just going down to the same exact idea, but having a B in the bass resolving down to an A. That's a whole step resolution right there. Now, that's not the end of the story. Because, and we're not going to get here today because part 6 is basically over, but part 7 starts on a C sharp minor progression. Okay, so now that A is going to act as a pivot, flat 6 to C sharp minor, which is a key we're very familiar with so far. We've seen it a bunch of times already. That bass riff was playing C sharp minor, so that's why I say that. So very interesting, an F sharp minor chord progression on top of a B minor bass line, creating some very interesting colors and parallel motions. These guys are geniuses. You got to give it to them. All right, everybody. That's going to be all for today. Episode number 6, we made it through an entire guitar solo. Probably the toughest guitar solo of the entire suite. We also made it through an entire keyboard solo. We didn't have to play the keyboard notes, but we had to play a pretty tricky rhythm on the bottom there. Derek Sherinian can't touch none of this. You know what I'm saying? If you'd like to further support the channel, please go to www.subscribestar.com/RomanOva Music. You can pledge any amount of money per month you want. I have some tiered systems going on. The $20 option gets you access to my RomanOva Music or RomanOva Guitar Gym videos, which is basically just, it's theory videos, it's guitar patterns, it's technique, it's everything that you could possibly want to learn, and it's cumulative. So the longer you say subscribe, the more videos you're going to have at your disposal, okay? You know, I'm about 5 or 6 deep now, and it's just going to keep on going and going and going. So that $20 is going to get you even more and more as we keep on moving through this cycle of life. You could also leave a tip on the PayPal. You can go to my website. I give lessons, private lessons, so if you want to get in direct contact with me to set something up like that, maybe a virtual lesson, and hey, if you're close to me, we can do a real life lesson, you know? A real life lesson. We're going to learn a lot of life lessons, and we've been learning a lot of life lessons in these videos. I have especially. These songs are very difficult. Dream Theater makes your life hard when you're playing the guitar, let me tell you that much, with all these sus2s and the 9s and 2 keys going at once. It's just too much for me, man. It's too much. But I do it all for you. All for you. You remember that song, All For You? Something, one of those bands from the 90s? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is that We're going to be getting into the final episode next time, so stick around for part 7. It's going to be the Crimson Sun sets. We're going to be setting the sun down below the horizon, and darkness will prevail after all. Good day to you.